Only two black men in my church. One of them was shot. The one still breathing, the one still raising his hands, said when the body dropped, it's dead too. Oh, oh, we were all hoping, but not surprised. A black man trying to break up a fight, gets shot in the back, in the neck, and the cheek by a cop, and he dies. But it's not a crime. My brother fell, my sister faced her children away. What are we gonna do? My brother fell, my sister faced her children away. What are we gonna do? She says if she starts crying, she'll never stop. So the lights stay on, the music plays all day. But when everyone and the sun is gone, she is all alone. My brother fell, my sister faced her children away. What are we gonna do? My brother fell, my sister faced her children away. What are we gonna do?
My story starts on the streets of the shop with two kids who had beefing, steady with fighting. Later that night, one made up his mind. He was tired of all the fighting. These guys had to die. They pulled down their masks and crossed the vacant lots. Pulled out their guns and blanketed them with shots. Bodies started to scatter as bullets ricochet. 20 minutes later, bodies are carted away. But hey, scenes like this don't even move me when seen on the television or in a movie. But this one is happening here next to me. And even as I'm rapping it, fear runs through me. Cause truly, it matters if it hadn't before. Black lives matter when the bullets hitting right next door. So from Portland to Chi-Town, we need you to remember that distance is a privilege you have to surrender. Distance is a privilege you have to surrender. From Chicago to Portland, we need you to remember that distance is a privilege you have to surrender.
Distance is a privilege we need to surrender if we're gonna carry burdens. Distance is a privilege we need to surrender if we're gonna love a neighbor. Distance is a privilege we need to surrender if we're gonna follow Jesus. Distance is a privilege that was taken from me, and I hope you take it from you too. My
Hello, everybody. I'm Pastor Nicole, and I am here today with a wonderful guest, Sunia Gibbs. And yeah, I'm really excited for you to be here today. Thank you for joining us, the Tabor Heights community.
Thank you.
I'm going to read your bio because it's fantastic.
Okay.
Sunia Gibbs is an artist and faith leader in pursuit of creative innovation and that promotes creativity and belonging. As an abstract painter and musician, she creates from conversations and experiences anchored to people and place. A founding pastor with the Groves at Sunnyside UMC in Portland, Oregon, she is currently reimagining and developing old community facilities as creative arts and inclusive neighborhood spaces.
Yay!
Welcome!
Thank you.
I also know you because we both are part of the POC Planters group within the UMC, and we kind of came in through similar avenues with the Innovation Vitality team.
I did, yep. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And we shared a room in like a cabin once, and so that really just cemented and bonded us.
Yes. Yeah.
It did.
As buddies. Yeah.
Well, if you're watching this, you just saw Sonia's video. I was wondering if you could kind of start us off by maybe talking a little bit about that song and what inspired you to write it, and
Yeah. I wrote that song after one of our parishioners and also a good friend of ours. A man who lives in my neighborhood and lived in my neighborhood, and our girls went to school together. So I've known their family for 12 years or so. And my friend Jason Washington was shot and killed at Portland State University by armed campus cops 2 years ago, June 29th, 2018. And so I was actually at Sunnyside UMC for Parish Collective United Methodist Church Joint Conference. I was sitting in the third row, third pew, when I got the text message and found out what had happened. And I spoke to a few people who were there because I was set to speak and say a few things at the conference. And instead of doing that, I ended up going over to Holman's Funeral Home right there on Hawthorne in Southeast Portland. And when I got there, the family was just getting ready to see the body for the first time. And I had never been, I've never experienced or seen that kind of grief and loss before in my entire life. It was the kind of, I don't know, it's in the air, like you feel it. You walk in and there's just like this overwhelming grief and sadness and trauma from this violent, abrupt death. He was 44 years old, father of 3, grandfather of 1, married almost 25 years. It would have been 25 years in August, to his high school sweetheart. So the song came out of a response to, honestly, what I experienced in that funeral home as a pastor. So I came in as clergy, I came in as pastor to bring comfort in a situation that honestly there was nothing that could have been said or done that was going to, was going to bring the kind of calm and comfort that you wish as a human you could bring to somebody else. And so the chorus of that is, my brother fell, my sister faints, because his wife couldn't even get to the room. Like her body couldn't handle the grief. I just had never witnessed grief, that kind of grief before, where her body couldn't contain it. She just kept fainting because she couldn't bring herself to going into the room. And then when the doors opened and the family saw Jason laying there, the wailing that filled that entire space, just echoing and reverberating through the halls, and those girls wailing, the children wailing, right? Initiated the wailing of all of us that were there to bring comfort and to be present, it ignited that wailing. And so anyway, the song was written out of that moment, and that those memories and that all of those sensory things that I took in are forever with me. And then the journey with them in seeking justice and seeking righteousness in that situation. That's the song. A few verses were added later, just to kind of tell that story of Jason and what happened with him. Yeah, and then there's a phrase at the end that I sing for the bridge. Distance is a privilege that we need to surrender. And so what I realized, just as an Asian American female in this scenario, as a pastor of a predominantly white congregation, white community, that for the longest time we had this distance that was a privilege we held, to not have conversations about race, to not have conversations about policing, to not have conversations. But now, instead of this situation, the national narrative, right, which is white cops shooting black men, that was something that happened in Chicago. That's something that happened in Detroit. That's something that happened in LA, or wherever we want to place it. It wasn't something that happened in my neighborhood, in my congregation. So that distance of privilege was taken from us, eliminated in a moment, tragically. And as I for sure wish that I could take that moment back. And I wish that we didn't have to go through what we've gone through. And at the same time, it was an awakening to a conversation that so many of my POC brothers and sisters have been having and wanting and needing all of us to engage in. But I had the privilege of distance to keep me and my congregation from that. So that's sort of the story behind that song.
How has your congregation responded to having those conversations?
It's been a journey, it's been, and honestly, in some way, it's a slow, intentional trajectory. And just like anything else, there are moments when the conversation gets more intense, it becomes a little more heated. It's like family, where you're like, you might even say things that you wish in a tone or in a way that you wish you could take back, or, it's not the prettiest, or like, oh yeah, let's just all join hands and sing a song together and be on the same page. It's been work in a lot of ways. And I think that the work that needs to be done, I think, is different based on where you are located in the conversation. So if you are Black and in my congregation, you're having a different conversation and you're having to deal with things differently than your white brother or sister that's in the congregation. So there are multiple conversations, I should say, multiple things that are going on, and we're inviting people into the work of becoming an anti-racist people, which is, it's work and it's ongoing. So there are people who have opted out for sure, and that's always really challenging. But at the same time, the overwhelming majority of our people are leaning in and wanting to grow and mature and know how. And mostly, it's not abstract. It's very real. How do we support a widow and 3 daughters and a granddaughter who have lost somebody very important to them? So it's support in a lot of different ways, in a lot of ways of showing up for them. Yeah.
And when you're describing entering that room and that grief, like, I don't think there's been a time that I've entered a space like that. But honestly, that makes me think a lot of, like, in referring to the Bible, like Jesus being crucified and entering that space with his mother and his family and his disciples, like being there in that moment, like,
yeah, mothers losing their sons. I can't imagine. I don't want to have to imagine that, or you're someone you love dearly, and yet that is what has happened to our brothers and sisters, like in the family of God, in the body of Christ, members, parts of our body have experienced this kind of grief. And so, yeah, I don't know. I had a front seat view of that experience. It's sort of like, it reminded, that kind of wailing, it reminded me of, the only place I've ever seen it would be like on the news, where they might shoot a picture, like you see film of a woman, again, across oceans, like in another country, a war-torn country, and the woman is just like beside herself wailing, like to God, to the universe, right? Like, why has this happened when she's lost her children or her family, or because of violence? Like, that is the closest I had come to experiencing and seeing that kind of grief, that level of pain. So I am both grateful and haunted, and now feel a sense of responsibility in responding to that. Yeah.
So you have been involved in some of the protests and things happening here in Portland, and most recently I've seen that you're kind of a part of this group of Asian Americans protesting Asians for Black lives, which I think is just great. And I kind of was wondering if you could speak some on that and why you think it's important, making that distinction and having that specific group joining the movement.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are reasons that whatever reasons other parts of the Asian community are getting engaged and involved. And certainly part of it is the story that I just told you. And part of it is that I am raising a Black presenting son. And so I'm thinking about his future. And but in all of that, there is a recognition of the skin I'm in, and the way in which the way in which the world treats me or responds to me, and how that is different than my white brothers and sisters and my Black brothers and sisters, and how I have been sort of placed in the middle, like in this gradient of whiteness or skin color, where I am situated in this middle space, where as an Asian I've also participated in fully wholeheartedly in being model minority, and having enough privilege to be close to whiteness and away from Blackness, so to speak, where I hold a certain amount of privilege, and recognize all the ways in which that privilege has kept me silent and kept a lot of the Asian community silent, and the ways in which white supremacy pits a lot of us against one another when we are actually all being impacted by it. And so, I don't know, for those reasons, I have been increasingly lending my voice and my actions and my body in the activity of in protest and in saying Black Lives Matter. And that I don't know. There's enough with the politeness about it. It's sort of how I honestly, my sentiment and how I feel about it. And I want to do everything that I can to elevate that message, Black Lives Matter, and not just be sitting by quietly as a model minority, or anyway, all of the generalizations about Asian Americans. And yeah, so that's why I'm getting involved in that, and my own discovery, honestly, as Nicole, I think you know this, but being adopted and having been raised in with a German English mom. My dad was Finnish, Scandinavian, grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I actually grew up not even recognizing my own Koreanness. And so the last 2 to 3 years is honestly a discovery of that, or a recovery. I don't even know. It's a little bit of both. But anyway, so part of this engagement is also me identifying myself. I am an Asian American. I am a Korean American. And what does that even mean? And what does that mean for this moment? and what are the ways in which I need to engage in redirecting and focusing on Black Lives Matter in this moment. Those are some of the questions that I'm still working through and dealing with.
One of the reasons I wanted to interview you was because of the ways that you have been very actively involved in the protests and really speaking for Black Lives Matter. And because of some of my own health concerns, I haven't been as physically involved in protests as I've wanted to, and my heart and my soul wants to, as a Black woman. But also I think that I'm trying to figure out how to engage things right now and not bring more harm to myself.
Yeah.
Because when George Floyd died, I spoke to the congregation about being really weary, and a deep weariness that has been rooted in me through generations of
Yeah.
pain from my ancestors and things like that. And so I've really tried to work hard about figuring out with my own identity how to engage what's happening right now. And I think a big part of that is conversations and doing things like this. And I think it's really, I've been surprised seeing how pastors and in a lot of ways churches have entered this conversation. And so I guess I'm wondering from you, why do you think it's okay, wait, two questions. One, what do you think the church's role is right now? And why do you think it's important for you as a pastor to kind of join this movement, to engage in protests and things like that?
Those are good questions. My first response is, even in response to what you just shared, I'm moved by that, just because part of it for me too is saying, it is responding to bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And the law of Christ is love, right? Like we are living to the law of love when we bear one another's burdens. And so for me, if I'm out there and I'm like, I want to stand in the gap for, be a representative for, be an advocate for, be an ally of, do you know what I mean? Like some of those words are kind of cliche words right now, but really I want to bear that burden. It's not fair. This is the justice part for me. That is not fair that my Black brothers and sisters are experiencing this over here, and that they're bearing that burden alone. That's not how this is supposed to work. We are supposed to be carrying this together. So if this matters, and matters in the way that I see it mattering to my Black brothers and sisters, then it needs to matter to me. So I'm like, so I need to show up, or I need to help alleviate whatever. And so that doesn't mean that you have to go to a protest, right? It doesn't mean that there are so many ways in which we can be there for one another and alleviate the years of that weight. And so I don't know, and I think that the body is the body, the gifts are in us to be able to bring healing and wholeness to one another, if we will listen and then obey and respond to the Holy Spirit, I believe. And so the way that I, as a faith leader, this is just in principle, I don't want to ask my people to do things I'm not willing to do. That's just a guiding personal thing. So if I can show up, I'm going to show up. If I can, and it is powerful. I think the temptation for sure is to make it then about me, like, I'm a hero, look at me out there, like, and it's just so good. What I see on the ground and what I hear on the ground is a lot of people saying, hey, let's focus, let's make the thing, like, Black Lives Matter, just remember that's why we're here. But I'm going, it is powerful and I'm participating because I want the people who are in my faith community to know that they can, if they, like just like they
Yeah.
can do that, and I want to lead by example. But I'm encouraging our people to show up the way that they can show up. For some of them that can't because of medical reasons, or maybe they're just not there yet. That's fine too. We're all figuring it out, but I just want them to know that there's something. There's a way in which we are invited to bear each other's burdens, and this is a moment to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that, the bearing each other's burdens. For me, I just really think about rejoicing together, but also being there to lament together, and how important that is. And
Yeah.
I think that people who aren't a part of the church, and who have been harmed by the church, are really looking for the church to do that.
I mean, we say, right, if our message is love, if our message is the cross, if our message is, I mean, this is what we've said we're about. And so yeah. Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
whenever that criticism is kind of, right, like thrown back at the church, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. Why is it that, I'm there with them going, yeah, my body, yes, my people, I'm with them. And I don't, I just, and I don't know, I also wrestle with, to what measure, but I think it just is, I think that if we are here, I honestly believe if we will listen to our brothers and sisters, we can't help but, if we will hear it, I think that we will have the Spirit of God in us is going to call a compassionate, generous response. And that can look a lot of ways. And and it can be really beautiful and healing. And then what a witness that is to the world, right? They know that we are following Jesus because of our love. And so, yeah, it's there. I didn't write it. I didn't say it. Yeah.
So I know that I've had conversations with many of the folks at my church, and also just the folks at my church and other people who haven't seen the protests firsthand or haven't been a part of that, or maybe I've gotten messages from family and friends who don't live in Portland asking if we're okay.
Yeah. My parents too. My parents are calling from Minnesota. Yeah.
So
burning down. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the people who are concerned about Portland are seeing these protests on the news, and they're seeing people throwing fireworks at the federal building, and they're seeing things that look really violent. And that's what, they're seeing videos of and stuff. And so I wonder, someone who has been at the protests, who have been in the midst of all of this, what you would say to those folks who are scared right now.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think there are probably 5 billion things I could say about this, but the first thing I would say is that so for me, I out of respect and kindness for my family who's worried when I am participating. So worry is real, right? And we are concerned for people we love and care about. That's good. Like, I think that's good. So I haven't stayed at the protests past midnight anytime that I've been there. So there have been, I have not been, when the majority of the people who are there for peaceful protests, who still get tear gassed, who still experience a lot of that stuff happening to them, I'm gone. I leave with them, and so I can't speak beyond what happens after that on a personal account. And in that respect, everything that everyone is seeing on the news is the same thing I'm seeing on the news, right? And the reality, too, the second thing I would say is that I only live a mile and a half from the downtown center. That's, I told I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm like a mile and a half from what's going on. She's like, a mile and a half? That's so close. But like, it's like a mile and a half is enough for me to not, if I didn't go down there, if I didn't see the news, I wouldn't know anything was going on. And I could live just a mile and a half from downtown and still only understand what's happening based on whatever news I'm looking at to know what's going on. And I don't know, I've just been kind of sitting with that as far going back to the privilege of distance conversation, that even geographically a mile and a half is enough distance, is enough for me to maintain a certain amount of privilege from which I could totally just say things about. But if I weren't going down there and seeing it firsthand, I might have a different story to tell. And so anyway, my experiences being down there have been very powerful. They've been surrounded by people who are there for peaceful protest. I have not experienced nor seen any violent outbreaks from people. Every time that I've been down there, it's been masses of people gathering to support Black Lives Matters. And even if people are coming down there for the spectacle of it, even if you are coming down there because you're actually mostly opposed to the feds being there, whatever the reasons that people might come, I think the messaging from the Black leadership that is, organizing all of this, the messaging is the same: Black Lives Matter. Like, that's the message. And so, that has been super powerful for me. I have participated in the Wall of Moms, and I will just say on a personal note, that has been maybe some of the most personally powerful experiences that I've had in being a mom, and saying, like, I am standing here as a mother in defense of who I see as my children. And like, it's participating in the humanity of us all in my role as a mom, and that has been really, really powerful for me. Yeah, I may have cried a few times just standing there thinking about the power of motherhood, which I think I tweeted this, but it was like, other than birthing, this may have been one of the most powerful experiences I've had as a mom, standing between, up against violence with my own body, like, as far as the embodied experience of protest and of what I think it means to bear one another's burdens, and what it means to attempt to make visible what is invisible. Like, it was very powerful.
That kind of brings up a couple thoughts for me. Is one, as someone who participated in the Wall of Moms, so this is something that's been happening for a few weeks now. A lot of moms have been going downtown and wearing different gear, protective gear and stuff, to stand in between protesters and federal agents and police. Being a part of that, do you think there's a need for it?
Do I think there's a need?
Mm-hmm. Like, now that you've been there and experienced it, do you think that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is, it's to shame, right? Which is a form of nonviolent protest. It's to shame the aggressor. It's to say, I'm a mom. Shame on you for tear gassing me. The dads with the leaf blowers. It's the same thing. It's to make a spectacle of tear gas and less lethal rounds being shot at moms and dads, at civilians, at people doing peaceful protests. And I think it is necessary to say, this is ridiculous. This is uncalled for. And Black Lives Matter. This is why we're here. So absolutely. And I think that it's also bringing people into the activity of protest and of of Black Lives Matter that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been involved or engaged. So I think that is also a powerful outcome of this experience. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that part of some of the narratives going around about the protests downtown and things like that are that why don't the protesters just disperse at this point? Like, it's been going on long enough. Like, why are there still like new movements or new people joining into the movement and stuff? And is all this necessary still? I think that maybe people won't outwardly say that, but I feel this attitude, I guess, towards just kind of the continuation of it. And Portland has been one of the cities that has really continually, every single night since the death of George Floyd, been on the streets.
Yeah.
Continuing this. And I think it will continue, and I hope it does, because with the privilege of distance, I think people can easily forget and kind of move on without the real work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just saw an article from OPB the other day of different Black organizations that have been working on coming up with it. I don't know if you saw that, making a list of demands that are specific to the systemic issues that are in our city and in our state. And I think that is very important. So I think also recognizing that there is, again, because of we can engage in many different ways. And so I think there is policy and there is protest, and those things are both working together to address the problems that we have, and the residual problems that we have because of our own history as Oregonians, on how this state came into existence, how our cities were formed. All of this, it matters, and there's residual impact from that, and so we need to address those things that are, systemically rooted in our place. Yeah. So I think all of it needs to continue, and I think that it will. And to remember that there are people who have been organizing and working on this for years before the Fed showed up, for years before George Floyd. I mean, this is work that many people have been engaged in for a long time, and so and that in many ways too, very humbly, this is I feel new, right? I'm a new person in this conversation in so many ways. So yeah.
Another thing that popped in my mind when you brought up your experience, a part of the Wall of Moms, is within my congregation, we have a lot of moms. We have a lot of, we have kind of the church moms that take care of the church community, and definitely kind of scooped me up when I first joined the church and made sure that I was welcomed, and just bringing me a part of the community there. And so I really think of them when you bring up this image of this wall of moms, and protecting and caring for all of these people with their physical bodies. And I wonder if you, as a mom, if you have any thoughts or advice for the moms within my congregation of how they can get involved, and what they can do right now. A lot of them are older, and being kind of on those front lines, that's not really in the cards for them. But I think that there's different work that we can do within our church still.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it is, as a person who believes so much in the church in the neighborhood, I think that we don't have to go, I don't have to go downtown to support Black Lives Matter and to support vulnerable people, or to help carry the weight or the burden that people are carrying in my own neighborhood, right? And so I think I love that you felt like you're scooped up and cared for. And I think just continuing that ongoing, I mean, not smothering, I'm not inviting that for your life, but I think um, just the way that if we could care for others the way that, like, how we care for our own children, like when I think about the way that I want to grow my kids, right? Like the experiences I want them to have, the ways in which I want them to grow and learn and flourish. Um, I think that the um, caring in that same way for caring for one another and remembering, right? Like we're somebody's kid. Like everyone is somebody's kid. Like how can we step in and how can we, certainly as an adoptee, I have a certain kind of understanding of being taken in by non-biologically related folks, and being deeply loved and cared for, and so I think that that's something that's in me and part of my life story. So I want to do like that. We got involved with foster care because that was part of my story, and I'm like, we need to do that for other families and other kids and help other families out. And so I think there's just so many ways that we can, as moms, support. There's certainly monetary ways, or you can provide, like, I think there's a lot of different efforts, particularly for the protest. If you're like, oh, I wish I could be out there actually protesting, how can I give directly to that? I think there are lots of avenues and ways that you can contribute money or resources, or masks, whatever. There's just so many different things I think that are needed out there. It seems like there's good support happening right now too for that. But as far as like even in your own place where you live, in your neighborhood, watching out for one another, and being those protectors that we are as moms and nurturers. And I don't know, I don't want to put too many generalities on who moms are, but however you mom, you can mom, and it's powerful, and they don't have to be our genetic offspring in order for us to care deeply and be moms.
Totally. I like that. However you mom, just mom.
Keep momming, yeah. However you do that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, for me, it's like I just need those words of encouragement, So if someone is just like, "Oh, you did a great job," blah blah blah, I'm like, "Oh, thanks." Like I'll keep doing it, like whatever it is, like however it is that we mother.
Something I've been seeing, well, like on the route from my house to my church, there's this group of seniors who stand in the middle of this roundabout, and they have signs, and it says "Seniors for Black Lives," and I just love that.
I've seen those with, like, the grandmas, and all that stuff is like, I love it.
I think that the main thing is like, wherever you are, whoever you are, or just being clear that you're standing with those who are being harmed and being oppressed, and that you're standing with Black lives, and just sharing that however you can. I think that is a big
it matters. Yeah. And I think there's a connected to that, because sometimes I will hear people from a very pragmatic viewpoint, what good is that, whatever that, and I used to work for an organization called Micah Challenge, and we were working on global poverty. And I remember one time, and it's policy work. So it was like, for me, it was just draining and felt so hopeless. And I remember talking to our executive director one time, and I was like, how do you keep doing this? Like, why? We're trying to get people to care about global poverty. And I'm like, anyway, and he said to me, and this has stuck with me. Remember, he's like, he's like, this isn't about, we do believe that we can enact change, and policy certainly does that. But it's about it's more about being on the right side of justice. And I just loved that sentiment. It was like, no matter what it was, even if it seemed like what you did didn't really matter in bringing about the shift or the change, finding ourselves on the right side in that moment, I think matters.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
So stand out there with that sign by yourself on the sidewalk. Yeah.
yes,
I mean, that's a whole other level of bravery. That when I've thought about that, I'm like, would I do that? That's, ooh, yeah.
yeah. I've seen this one woman who stands like by gas stations and she just has a Black Lives Matter sign, and I see her there most days just by
Yeah.
herself, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Hmm. Okay, what would you like church folk to take away from this conversation? What do you hope they leave with?
Um, yeah, whether or not they got this from this conversation, I don't know. I'm like, well, based on what we talked about. But um, generally speaking, I hope that we are inspired and encouraged to towards love for our brothers and sisters. And then to have the courage to do whatever it is that we can do, whatever's within our power, to do, to advocate, to be advocates. And yeah, I just anytime, whether it's I'm singing a song or when I'm preaching or if I'm out protesting, like my main thing, I want people to be inspired to do good. I want people to be like to be moved, to be, to move out of apathy or complacency or disillusionment or discouragement or whatever it is that has kept us maybe inactive or silent or questioning, whatever that is, to be moved out of that place into good action that demonstrates the love of God. So I hope that happens. Yes. Yeah.
Me too.
Yes. That's my hope.
As we wrap this up, thank you so much for joining me today and for doing an interview while you're on vacation. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's so funny is I told Paul, who is my partner, spouse, he's like, why did you schedule this now? And I'm like, well, Nicole asked me, I wanted to help out, and can you just take the kids to the beach for a minute so I can, anyway. Yeah. No, I'm so happy to do it. This stuff matters to me. It's so life-giving to me to be able to talk about it. And so, yeah, I love this. I love these kinds of conversations. I could have them forever. So thanks for inviting me to share some of my very humble early thoughts on this stuff. But yeah, I am in beach mode. I'm in this nondescript lamp, and you can tell, like, you can tell I'm in a hotel room. But the ocean is literally just right there. I can see it. I can hear it.
Yeah, we can hear it. And I wish I was at the ocean.
Yeah, it's very nice. It is cold, as the Oregon coast is.
So hot here in Portland. I wish I was at the ocean.
I know, right? I know. That's not a complaint at all, but I'm like, oh, I didn't quite pack enough layers. So I just throw on all my loungewear at the same time and head out there.
And then your swimsuit on top of that.
Yeah, totally. Anyway. Yes, we're socially distancing and doing all those appropriate things in the very cold, beach of Lincoln City. It's lovely.
So you heard it here first. If you want to find Sunia, she's at Lincoln City in this hotel room.
Yeah. By the time this airs, I'll be back in Portland, lighting it up with everyone. So that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always a joy to talk to you. And now I will try to figure out how to stop this recording.